The Russians continue to strike Ukrainian territory. There was another attack last night, 5 dead and several injured in a drone attack. I'll let you watch. Xavier Teitelman, which drones were used last night?
Usually it's Gerbera or Shahed drones. The Shahed is heavier. Here we see the explosion size suggesting over 80 kg of explosives. The Gerbera are drones that carry just a few kilos and are used on non-hardened targets like outdoor oil depots. And actually this long-distance warfare is really very different from what's happening on the front lines today, long-distance warfare. The Russians persist in targeting civilians and infrastructure to cause suffering and deaths. To keep causing this exodus, which means that today the population in the free part of Ukraine has dropped below 30 million inhabitants. Ukrainians also continue to achieve significant successes here. Today, for example, we learned the Russians have lost 70% of their oil revenue since the start of the year compared to last year, which was already lower. So we know that on both sides they are continuing this war of attrition.
The command of the Ukrainian Air Force says tonight that the Russian arsenal allows the occupiers to carry out massive missile strikes on Ukraine. Once or twice a week. These kinds of attacks, do you confirm, General?
Yes, absolutely, since I believe that yesterday there was a strike that caused more than 600. There were 600 drones and then 40 missiles. They are also ramping up their missile capabilities. There weren't many, so these strikes are significant. I remember 2 or 3 years ago there were 60 or 80 vectors that were hitting Ukraine. People were saying those were massive strikes. I was saying it was nothing at all. Today, when there are 600 or 700, it's truly quite considerable indeed.
First, the Russians used up their stock, then launched 600 missiles in the early days of the war. These were real missiles, each with 400-500 kilos of explosives traveling at 800 km/h. They sold out their stock and resumed production. 4 or 5 missiles per month. Now we're at about 100 missiles per month because they've massively accelerated their production. Also, they can't launch waves of missiles like at the war's start. Since they're out of stock, they're mass producing these Shahed kamikaze drones. The question now is, how do we intercept them? There are several methods, including interception. And I want to draw a parallel with the Ukrainian sea.
It's possible to intercept them. Just as much.
Over 90% of these kamikaze drones, which are really low-cost missiles, are intercepted. Firing 600 still lets 60 through, and those 60 unfortunately cause this damage.
To explain this pressure on Ukrainian territory, tonight we have exclusive testimony from 2 French fighters in the Ukrainian Special Forces, both familiar to you. Xavier Teitelman, I was with
them 3 weeks ago.
There you go. Your nicknames are Lake and Papillon. We are delighted to have you with us in the studio tonight. You'll be able to describe the situation for us. We've talked about the drone attacks you've also experienced in the Donbass. How do you deal with that every day in Ukraine?
Hello, Xavier. Hello, everyone. It depends, especially if you're not on the front line. Even 40 or 50 kilometers away, we're never truly safe. Recently, 2 journalists died near us because the Russians now with drones and fiber optics are able to go further than expected to hit Ukrainian logistics. Exactly. So it's a bit dangerous.
Subtitling ST.
What does the current front line look like?
Actually, we have the 0 line, but most of the Russian drones are operating almost exactly 50 to 60 kilometers behind it.
We're discussing large drones here. Small drones are near line 1. The Russians mainly aim to disrupt logistics and block access to the contact line. And Papillon, whom we see here, let me clarify, he speaks French, he's Moroccan. And it's actually funny to see Azov with a Moroccan fighting alongside them once again. The Russian false storytelling once again proves that they're making things up. But aside from that, he's now a heavy drone operator. That means he has the strategic ability to strike deep as well. The front is saturated over 5 kilometers on each side with 15,000 kamikaze drones per camp used daily. And then indeed it gets harder and harder because in the rear, the Russians, like the Ukrainians, are capable of inflicting pain. For example, over 20 kilometers behind the front line, especially for logistics.
General Richoux, a question for the ground fighters.
Yes, I would really like to know. On the central front, there was a lot of Russian information telling us that Pokrov and Kupian had fallen. Is there any doubt on the Ukrainian side at the front? Or do you think these front lines are being held firmly right now?
The front lines are still being held, though. There may have been some doubt about 2 weeks ago, but we have feedback from people who are there, and they're telling us that it's still holding. So from there.
You need to understand that Ukrainians also retreated to their next defensive lines. And the heroic defense of Pokrov for a long time actually made it possible to build defenses that are really solid. The Kupins are fighting in Kramatorsk mainly and in front of Kramatorsk. I've seen the defenses and lines moving along the front for 3.5 years. I haven't seen defensive lines as strong as the ones protecting Kramatorsk. And when you think that it took the Russians 560 days just to reach the city Pokrovsk, well, it's obviously going to take even longer to continue toward Kramatorsk.
Like Papillon, how is the morale of the fighters on the ground? You've heard the latest feedback about the negotiations as well as the corruption scandals within the inner circle close to Volodymyr Zelensky. Has that affected the fighters' morale on the ground?
No, honestly, it hasn't. No, we stay, do our job, and defend the territory, even as the Russians keep coming to these cities. We're here, not involved in politics. We're soldiers, doing our job and protecting those behind us.
And then it's actually a good sign that corruption cases are coming out. It means people are going to be judged. It's actually a sign of a healthy democracy.
No, thank you.
One of you is a butterfly drone operator. When you operate with drones, what does the front line look like? Do you operate everything underground?
No, actually, it's different. Because with drones, there are several types of drones. And especially for me, in my specialty, it's actually a vampire drone. As Xavier said, he knows a bit more about this subject. Actually, when I get my mission, it's always going to be kilometers behind their lines. I can go up to 25 kilometers. So sometimes before their troops or logistics are ready, I'm already under them and doing my job.
Actually, Papillon is one of the few foreigners who is trained on strategic level drones. That means when we're talking about these drones, he'll be able to drop up to 40 kilos. It will also support aerial logistics to resupply the front line, which is beneficial. The videos he shared with me very recently, which unfortunately we can't share with you, he bombs targets by dropping anti-tank mines on them. He can drop mines to remine areas that the Russians think they've cleared before launching an assault. So here we're really targeting Russia's strategic depth to prevent it from being able to carry out assaults. We
also remember that there have been drones used to resupply troops who were wounded on the front line by dropping medical supplies and providing walkie-talkies and by enabling the evacuation of these medical personnel. Today, the drone is truly a revolution that allows isolated personnel who no longer have communication with the rear to continue being supplied and even rescued. Because these personnel were rescued.
Lake Papillon, you can choose not to answer my question because I know it might be complicated for you over there. But can you attack Russian military infrastructure from your positions or not?
No, but the majority. I can't explain everything, but as soon as I personally received the information, because Lake, he's a reconnaissance drone operator. After I receive my missions, I know exactly what C, but I'm not going to go further because I have a drone that's imported a little bit. With jamming, there's now a question about it on the front line. Even though my drone has long range, it's limited to 25 kilometers. I can't go any farther, but really we need to go farther. It has fiber optic.
And
afterwards, there are other drones, bigger ones.
You have to understand that there's an ecosystem around the drone that's gigantic, meaning that one can't work without the other. Lech will have observation drones that will, for example, detect Russian mines before the Ukrainians can start moving forward. He will see deep into Russian positions as they advance, sometimes kilometers before they arrive. And at that moment, Papillon will go with his heavy drone to carry out bombing. One can't work without the other. Then there are the Papillon first-person view kamikaze drones. As far as I know, he hasn't done that mission yet. But there are possibilities of having large drones that will approach the front to launch first-person view kamikaze drones, still piloted by someone behind. That means there are really 4, 5, or 6 people who can carry out coordinated operations just with drones, or even another drone that will act as a relay. Communication can be complicated, especially with electronic warfare, as he mentioned.
Don't confuse them with strategic drones sent to refineries and similar targets. Those drones can travel 1,000, 2,000 kilometers, have artificial intelligence, and carry far more explosives, and that are capable of striking very, very deep inside the territory. Here, these are really contact drones, drones that strike the front line, but they're still drones, I imagine. So I wonder, are they capable of striking command centers, logistics depots, etc., that are just behind the lines?
Yes, we can do that and even more. Because now almost all the drones we have are equipped with artificial intelligence. Because I just got back 2 days ago and I tested it right away on my drone. Honestly, it really helps the operator a lot. Because sometimes in the evening we can't really see a thermal signature of something. And as soon as we use it, it shows us the exact location. After that, we let the drone do its job.
Papillon Lake. I was with one of you yesterday with Paco, who was live with us on our channel, who told us that the Russian kamikaze drones were often trying to target your fighters on the ground in the Donbass. How does that actually happen? How do you avoid that?
We're no longer being hit, actually. We're no longer being targeted. We're not targeted anymore. Sertoli and the first person are civilians, and the drone operator, none of us are targeted now.
For example, we try not to speak English when we're at the rear base, because we become even more of a target, because there are still people who sell information, so we try to be careful. But out in the field, the best way to hide is to throw yourself into a bush and move everything around, usually when facing first-person view drones.
Paco was also telling me about the prisoners taken by your units. Do you see them? Many Russians, many foreigners? What kind of prisoners have you seen on the ground?
Many foreigners. Certainly, lately I've had a lot of Russian prisoners. After that, we treat them with respect, even though we, in Azov, still have many prisoners with them who haven't been released, and until now in the future, so that they will be released. And lately, even though the enemy side, they know it much better than we do, most of them surrender, because when they get surrounded or something, the best way for them to stay alive is to surrender. And after that, it's the drones that take over the operation. They
surrender without contact, arriving unarmed with a white flag on the roads. Jay, to be picked up by our units and not get shot, actually.
Lake Papillon, thank you for being live with us. Xavier, General Richoux, when you hear these testimonies, is there a way for the Ukrainians to be much more offensive in the coming days? When we see these negotiations stalling at the moment, are there ways without help? I want to say from the Americans, from Westerners in general, so that they can be more offensive to strike, especially on Russian territory.
Not just on Russian territory. We know victory won't come from the battlefield. Neither of the two protagonists is capable of turning the tables and winning, or advancing by 50 kilometers and conquering the Donbass. At this pace, Russia would take the Donbass in 1 or 2 years. We know they usually retreat instead of accelerate due to the defenses ahead. The Ukrainians on their side, unfortunately, haven't been given the necessary equipment. So the end of this war and the pressure being applied during these negotiations is more on the rear, on the strategic side. Targeting factories, such as the battery factory destroyed by Ukrainians, is strategic. 3 refineries hit in 10 days is a lot, plus in the Black Sea 2 more.
Oil tankers.
Russian ones that were coming back to reload, arriving in the Black Sea, both of which were destroyed. That's all. Those are the current images. We're on board these naval drones because now drones are everywhere. The naval drone, the Sea Baby. And what's extraordinary is that you have a second drone filming alongside to have proof. So I talked with some sailors and they told me that they really hit the back at the spot where even if we repaired the line, the propeller shaft will be damaged. That means it's not possible to repair it properly. And there's an efficiency issue. We're over 1,000 kilometers away, inside Turkey's exclusive economic zone. The Turks haven't complained, meaning that the Turks consider that they could complain. Legally, they could claim their neutrality is under attack, but they're not complaining. That means the Turks accept this kind of attack in their exclusive economic zone.
There's also the question of long-range strikes on Russian territory. Can the Ukrainians now carry out these attacks without Western help and also without Western intelligence? A lot.
Of course. Because even when we talk about the American cruise missiles, Thomas Hawk, that's just a few hundred kilometers. They can hit targets at 8,000, 1,100, 2,500, and 2,000 kilometers using artificial intelligence, piloted drones. Maybe not a lot of explosives because they still have to go far, but they are truly capable of doing it. And what she tells us is very interesting and very important, because here we're clearly dealing with a political message. That is to say, in the context of negotiations, as Xavier rightly said, it's absolutely necessary to show the opponent that we're winning, that we're not just enduring it. And so the Russians are doing exactly the same thing by launching 500, 600 missiles. We can clearly see that they've sped up the delivery of missiles over Kyiv and so on. But the bombing of Novorossiysk clearly shows this, that the Ukrainians are doing exactly the same thing to show Americans they aren't losing the war and still have the upper hand, able to infiltrate and cause significant damage. And so here, really, war is the continuation of politics by other means, right in the middle of negotiations, to have as many advantages as possible during these talks.
You have to understand that the low-cost missiles, once again, which can reach up to 1,000 to 1,200 kilometers, the Ukrainians are producing about 200 of them per day now. The Russians on their side have a higher number, but in reality, the interception rate in Russia is much lower. And so, when you count the number of confirmed hits on valuable targets, when they destroy a building, 3 people die, tragically for the Ukrainians, but it won't stop the military from fighting. And so, the number of relevant, useful targets that both sides are hitting, the Ukrainians tend to hit more of them right now for almost 6 months than what the Russians are able to hit. We
learned Ukraine is boosting its defense with a French-made anti-drone wall. Will you discuss its credibility? Xavier Titelman, is this a French company's innovation? Atrial, so we're actually not that bad at anti-drone warfare, right?
That's not it. It's just that we certainly have things that have proven themselves in different theaters of operations, but not in military theaters of this density. And unfortunately, I have bad memories, for example, about our electronic warfare systems.
So it hasn't been tested in real conditions?
That's exactly the difference. The French electronic warfare system that we put on board a Navy ship worked against drone tools. In Ukraine, it performed worse than locally made systems costing 20 times less. I sincerely hope that this French system will prove its effectiveness when it's on site, but for that we'll have to wait a few months to get the answer. But the concept is great. Detection, interception, collision, jamming. It's a full ecosystem to protect areas. I think we'll have answers in the next few weeks.
In terms of innovation, last March, NATO actually organized a competition dedicated to defense innovations, inviting Ukrainian and Western companies to present their most promising projects. There were some finalists. I was
On the jury.
That's right, you were on the jury. Xavier Titelman, what are your thoughts? Is there anything to it? So, not necessarily from the Ukrainian side. I'm going to ask you a tricky question, but more from our side, the European side. What is currently helping the Ukrainians to surpass the Ukrainians in this area?
The difficulty is that when we compare the Ukrainians with what's being offered abroad, the Ukrainians tell me, here's what we're doing. And then the foreigners, the French, the Americans, the Swedes, the Germans, their vision, their perspective for the next 2 or 3 years was to do less well than what was already operational in Ukraine. So there was a kind of gap, and we put the Ukrainians ahead. We told them they were in a different league and had already won, so the competition would be among the others. For example, Alta Ares won in intercepting glide bombs. That was just 6 months ago. Alta Ares' anti-Shahed interceptor drone has already proven itself.
Company of what? Nationality? French? And so?
The French won this competition. Not because I voted for them a lot, but because they were truly good. And indeed, they are the first ones who actually have a 100% foreign company that managed to destroy kamikaze drones, Shahed, by late October, who validated the test in a framework as well. That is to say, for the first time in a European country, we can produce drones that will be supplied to the Ukrainians to destroy their kamikaze drones on site. That's new. It's the drone given to Zelensky a few days ago during his last visit.
The real problem is speed. We were there. The Direction Générale de l'Armement, for example, is a crucial tool for our armed forces and was mainly created to produce the Rafale. We have Polytechnic graduates working on nuclear ballistic missile submarines, making our tool extremely efficient and unbeatable. However, we lack the speed and rapid adaptability for such large projects today. We can't do it. So the challenge tomorrow is really to unleash energy and make sure that private companies can take part in the matter. And as Xavier often says, the problem isn't making 4 million drones for the States today, it's being able to make them tomorrow. And that they're up to date, that they're not obsolete, because if we make them now, apparently next month they'll be obsolete.
The main challenge is that having top engineers isn't enough. You also need extensive knowledge. The goal of artificial intelligence is to train Altair's models. Returning to their point, last year there were 25,000 Ukrainian drones showing they have this capability. The drone interceptor drones, the Sting, for example, have already destroyed 1,400 drones. Shard 1,400. You can have the best engineers in the world, but they don't have that knowledge base that makes them good. Microphones that detect and identify overhead missiles. They have hundreds of microphones and they've recorded over 40,000 sounds. This allows them to differentiate kamikaze drones from Chinese observation drones and identify missiles. We might have better engineers and better microphones, but we're not deployed over there. And that's a big difference because you can't compete without having the knowledge base. That's why today we're falling behind.
Including these drones in our armies is the goal for 2026. I was lucky to have the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Pierre Schill, on this set, who told me no, we're not behind when it comes to drones. When you see what the Budenswar is doing, wanting to set up 6 units for the use of kamikaze drones, the first one should be operational by 2027. I see your smug smiles, but in France, where do we stand? Let's say concretely where we are right now. Xavier.
I don't want to contradict the Chief of Staff of the Army, but we're at the 2022 level. The Ukrainians in 2021 were better than we are today. It's sad, it's unfortunate. But yes, maybe we're not behind if we compare ourselves with our neighbors, but we're very behind, very, very behind. If we compare ourselves to the Ukrainians and the Russians, obviously. And
To the Germans?
the German model isn't really relevant. They were just fortunate to provide drones to Ukraine early. I'll make it simple. The French went to Ukraine, said it's war, and I'll give you 15% off. So they didn't buy. The Germans offered drones, set up a design office, hired staff, and handle maintenance there. We do it.
Now with Renault.
Yes, that's good. But they did it in April 2022. And so they were able to improve the quality of some of their drones for certain small brands faster than we did. We arrived a bit late. Fortunately, we have Dolaire, a French company present in Ukraine since 2014 as part of the OSO. They were observing we have some strengths, as do the Germans, but overall we lack the numbers. So what the Germans are doing is very good. They have units that are 100% dedicated to drones. We have a perspective that's a little bit different. Our special forces already have loitering munitions like the Switchblades, which Ukraine used successfully. In 2022, our special forces have them, but we usually integrate drones into army tactical groups. There's a bit of everything: air defense, tanks, armored vehicles, transports, and drones. The Germans also create dedicated units. I don't know which is the right model.
You once told me, General Richoux, that in Germany, where you worked, they don't have a Direction Générale de l'Armement or a General Directorate of Armaments for Development.
They have something that I never managed to understand in 3 years. In other words, offices that are somewhat scattered, even geographically. There was one that was completely in the east of Berlin, the other was near the Ministry of Defense, and all of that communication between them was pretty poor. Which means that I would say their timelines for acquiring armaments are absolutely considerable. It took them almost 10 years to acquire the Heckler & Koch 416, which is the French assault rifle, that's actually German, and which we've had since 2017, which was put into service in 2017. It took them almost 10 years. It failed. There was a tender that was cancelled. They started over to end up 10 years later with a rifle that comes out of their own workshops. So you see, they're not there at all yet. It's quite an extraordinary tool for that. On the other hand, the Eurodrone, with a 24-meter wingspan, twin engines, 117 million euros, and so on. This isn't what's needed. While somewhat useful, it's clearly not suitable for this war. The issue is industrial capacity. How can we instantly produce 4 or 5 million drones?
Very quickly. Xavier.
Perfect. All right, obviously. We also haven't revised the requirements we set for ourselves in the past. We have goals that haven't been changed. The Eurodrone should be cancelled. Should the aircraft carrier be delayed a few years? Either way, we need many more drones. An anti-tank missile is worth 500 kamikaze drones. The Ukrainians, they make their choice.
Thank you, Xavier Teitelman and General Richoux. We'll continue after a short break.